So if you've been following my board gaming podcast for a while, it is no secret that I'm a big fan of dungeon crawler board games. That kind of light to medium RPG feel, roll up or draw a character, go into the dungeon, get some loot, beat up some bad guys, take out the boss monster, save the day. Essentially a Dungeons & Dragons campaign condensed into one or two gaming sessions. And while many of these games, like Dark Souls is a great example, massive Souls fan, getting good at it. Cooperative play. A lot of games have a cooperative element where it's the party, the players, versus the cards, versus the game system, or an automated Overlord. While many games like Descent, Dungeon Saga, or even something as simple as Hero Quest, classic Hero Quest, you have an Overlord component where the party is against one player who's the Overlord. And if you're coming from a role-playing background, the first challenge, of course, is you are not there to be friendly. You are not there to create the story. The game does that. You are there to manage your resources, your monsters, your minions, your threat cards, whatever it's going to be based on the system, and really be ruthless and take apart the party, almost like the evil dungeon master. It can be a little overwhelming because you're up against 2, 3, or 4 players. They're kind of ganging up on you, especially if they are coordinated as a team. So in this podcast, I wanted to look at some general tactics, take those wargaming tactics that we talk about in other systems that I play, Warhammer 40,000, X-Wing, Battletech, and apply them in a ruthless but good way as the Overlord. Now, this is not system specific, so it'll have to be tweaked a little bit. Even if you're playing a game that isn't so much dungeon narrative, like Conan, massive Conan fan, has a very, very slick and advanced Overlord mechanic. A lot of really amazing options, perhaps the most complex out of all of them. But at its heart, it's still an Overlord system. So the first thing that I'm looking at as the Overlord, we're going to have some minions to control, some lesser monsters. We're going to have some sort of fate, cards, ability, power stones, resources to allow me to play traps or other things in the dungeon, scale things up, summon other monsters, whether it's dice or whether it's some sort of card-based unit at my command. And then, based on the mission, usually there's going to be some sort of end boss or lieutenant, some sort of monster that's less minion and more lieutenant, a jacked up monster, maybe an end boss, or like an example of Conan, the first adventure, no spoilers, the picked village. You have a number of hyenas, you've got the picks, they're kind of the fodder, but you also have a giant snake, something that would make Thulsa Doom very, very proud to have. So utilizing this powerful piece, this powerful monster on the table. The first thing, I want to get an idea as the Overlord, the composition of the other players. Are they all friends that regularly game together? Otherwise, is this part of the regular gaming group where I'm sitting around with all my friends? We know each other. I know how they play. I know that they are going to be very, very coordinated, acting together as a team, long-term goals. That's going to make things a lot harder right there. Or is this something, and equally as fun, where it's a pickup game? You go to a hobby shop, you go to your club, you unpack Conan, kind of whoever sits down first, you're ready to go. In an instance like that, I want to gauge, are they going to work as a team, or are they going to be a little bit more self-interested, no judgment on this, of kind of doing their own thing, or just, hey, I want to see how crazy I can get. Is the party going to be united or divided? I'm going to have a strategy for each one, but if they're divided, it makes things a little bit easier for me. If they're united, it makes it a little bit harder. So that's kind of the first thing I'm thinking about as I'm looking through my cards or looking at the mission strategy. The second piece is that with the minions that I have, the lesser monsters, I'm not going to buff them. I'm not going to go out of the way to jack them up or play cards that are going to enhance them. If I can for free, or the system allows me to do that, if they move somewhere, sure, I'll take advantage of it. But I'm not going to devote resources to trying to jack up something that has low stats, because if I apply the math hammer, it's never really going to work out. I'd rather save my power cards, my gems, my resources, my tokens, whatever it's going to be, the draws in my hand, for when we need it at the end of the game. I'm certainly not going to do it at the beginning of the game, Because in all these games, there's a timer going on, whether it's a mission timer. In Dungeon Saga, the players have to complete the quest, making it through the dungeon, before the Overlord becomes too powerful with their hands, and then they auto-lose, whether that's 8 turns, 10 turns, or 12 turns. In the Conan resource system, which is really amazing, you have these power gems that you're cycling back and forth, and once you run out of gems, the character's gone. You lose gems by taking damage or kind of overtaxing and overextending yourself on there. So at the beginning of the game, or something as simple as Descent, well, Descent's awesome too, as the Overlord. You've got the maximum health, you've got the maximum abilities, you're ready to go. I don't want to take on the players with buffing my minions or playing powerful cards at the beginning of the game. They're just too powerful. And again, if they're united, it's going to be harder. If they're divided, a little bit easier. It's kind of the risk scale on there. Way too powerful at the beginning of the game. I want to wait until they've come into the dungeon a little bit, until they've made some decisions as a group, until I can throw some volume of dice at them. So the second tier strategy, volume of dice. Playing Warhammer 40,000, which I love, you roll a lot of dice. And if you roll enough dice, depending on whether it's you or your opponent, good things or bad things happen. So throughout the game, even if a character has high armor, Dungeon Saga the Dwarf, very, very high armor, almost impossible to break. But the Dwarf will have a couple of bad rolls here and there. It'll start to weaken. The Barbarian in Dungeon Saga, well, I mean, he's going in bare-chested. He's just got a loincloth, no armor, but tremendous attack value. So this barbarian character has the complexity of wanting to go up there and thump on the skeletons and the zombies in Dungeon Saga, but he's going to expose himself to getting attacked back and taking damage. He's going to take damage as he goes through the dungeon. So I just want to throw some minions to get a feeler out there and start to grind down the party a little bit. Now, if they are not united and someone goes off on their own, either they move too far ahead, right? I see this a lot in Descent, where you have these treasure markers and everything is revealed at the beginning of the adventure. So you kind of know where the loot is on there. And you know, for the most part, you can't transfer the loot into the next adventure, especially if this is a longer quest. You want to get that loot. You might need that loot, especially if you don't know the cards I have as the Overlord. But if I pick up a few cards that have the ability to spawn more, then you want to have some healing potions. You want to have some power potions on there. So occasionally what you see is, rather than moving as a group, someone in the party, doesn't always have to be the rogue or the rogue-like character, they're going to move out and try and grab some of that loot. If they become isolated, then I'm going to pounce on them. Then I'm going to try and go 2 or 3 minions onto one, regardless of what point in the game. A recent game of Conan, I was playing the Overlord, and we were playing the second or third scenario where Conan is on a pirate ship. He's kind of doing his thing up and down the coast, raiding and stuff, and some of the local leadership, nobles, government, whatever, is the Conan universe catches up to him, and it's a classic map. It's a really cool map of 2 ships that went side to side, and now it's a boarding action. So you got to make some cool rolls to actually leap over onto the other side of the ship. But on the opposing enemy ship, there was a number of chests. So the player playing the thief character, who runs around throwing knives and stuff, a really awesome character to play, he just kind of goes solo. And I'm like, what? Like, clear and secure your ship first before you jump over onto the other ship. But as the Overlord, I was allowed to really punish him because you're jumping onto my ship. So you're coming closer to me. You're expending your resource tokens. You have little gems in Conan that you move back and forth. You're expending your gems to get over to me. And you're allowing me to now kind of gang up on you. And he got a couple of items. He got like an explosive bomb and I think a crossbow or some chainmail. It was good stuff. But at that point, I was able to summon some reinforcements, which normally I wouldn't do until later on the game. But you gave me that opportunity. So I want to look for that one player that's always going to move out and try and then spend resources and gang up on them. So eventually, at some point, the dice are going to go up against someone in the game, despite the armor or lack of armor. they're going to take some wounds. You're going to see who starts to break first. Rather than equally apply pressure to, let's say it's 4 characters, a lot of dungeon crawls are 4 versus 1, I'm going to throw a little bit at everybody, see what happens, but I'm not necessarily going to gang up on someone, not because I'm going easy on them, because I just want to see where we're going, what we're happening, unless you give it to me. I mean, if you're the wizard in Dungeon Saga and you stride forward, I'm sorry, I have to take it. I have to go for it. As soon as we move into the mid-game and someone now gets hurt, they're down a little bit, they're hurting a little bit, then now I look at the cards that I have. And I hate to say, I'm going to gang up on them. I'm going to summon some stuff. I'm going to bring forth some monsters. I'm going to kind of utilize what resources I have and really try to put the pain and try to knock out that character, whoever it is. If I knock them out, maybe the game loses, like in Dungeon Saga, or maybe it continues like in Descent or Conan, unless it's a key character, where now we have one less. And then I'm going to go to the next character and the next character on there. When we get to a boss encounter, whether it's the mission or now you're kind of at the end of the dungeon, or I finally have enough to play that giant snake in Conan without paying 7 gems. It's moved down the river of Styx there, and it's 1 gem, and I'm like, pow, 1 gem to activate. We're going to go after the weakest character, the absolute weakest character. And there's this temptation in these games. Conan is an example. Conan generates a tremendous amount of attack dice. With his axe, he can cleave through 4 or 5 of your minions like they're nothing. I mean, it's Conan. I expect that. That's part of the game where you pick up this massive fistful of dice and you're like, pow, rolling it. If I take my giant snake and I throw him against Conan, probably what's going to happen, I'm going to wound Conan, but the snake is going to get just totally beat up and chewed through. What have I really accomplished? I wounded Conan, but he's still in the game. I've taken some of his gem resources, shifted them over to Lost Life. He's still in the game. I could get lucky. Maybe I'll throw in a bunch of dice for some rerolls and to boost, gems to reroll and get some boosts. Maybe. I'd rather go after the weakest on there. So in the case of Conan, it would be the mage if we're looking at the first mission, assuming I can get my hands on him. Even if I can't, because the smart party will look, like Dungeon Saga, you'll put the barbarian and you'll put the dwarf first. The elf, she's ranged. You'll float her in the back or maybe on the sides. And of course, the wizard, he's hanging out way in the back. If I have a troll in Dungeon Saga, they have a cave troll, right? I will move through and not try to engage the dwarf and the barbarian. I'll move past them. Even if I can't get to the wizard or to the elf, now that's going to pull away the other characters. Get them chasing you, right? I'm not going to take my snake and go after Conan. I'm going to go after the wizard. Well, even if I can't catch the wizard this turn, let's say the wizard's on the other side of the village. It's going to take 2 turns. The very fact that I'm moving that snake towards the wizard, now I'm forcing Conan and the thief, the rogue, to go after the snake. So it's not so much about with your bosses dealing damage, although they can, and you'll take it if it's there. It's more about using them as a key influencer piece to mess around with the heroes, the characters, their movement, anything you can to help mess up the mission or screw the mission over for them. So those are kind of my thoughts and the tactics that I utilize playing on there. And I guess it's only fair, since we've applied this wargaming criteria to Overlord tactics, we need to look at the player, hero, character tactics against the Overlord using wargaming tactics.